Good morning, students. I hope you are fit and fine and you have paid sufficient or proper attention towards your studies. Now, today we are going to take the final and concluding part of the Cold War era. Now, today we will discuss about challenges of bipolarity. Bipolarity means two poles. You know well, earlier we have studied about the two power blocks, the US and the USSR. Now, you know well, and I think now you have understood why these two power blocks came to existence and what were the reasons of their rivalries. But this rivalry became a danger for the peace of the world because they were trying to involve more and more countries in their blocks, and that's why the world divided into two power blocks. But this scene changed, and after 1950, some major changes were seen in the world politics. When NAM or NAM came to existence. Here, NAM stands for Non-Aligned Movement. Earlier, you have studied about it in brief. Now, three major leaders in Asia and Europe. In Yugoslavia, Joseph Broz Tito. In India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, and in Egypt, Gamal Abdul Nasser. These three leaders had friendly relations and they met in 1956 and they decided to bring the world out from the rivalries of the two power blocks. In their action, two other leaders, the president of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah, I think you have read about him in your ninth class, and the president of Indonesia, General Sukarno. These were the leaders who wanted to bring changes in the world politics. As we have discussed earlier, that when India got freedom or independence, India decided not to join any of the power bloc because India wanted to adopt her independent foreign policy. As well as India and some other countries did not want to encourage the armed races in the world. That's why in 1961 in Belgrade, then capital of Yugoslavia, first summit of non-aligned movement took place and later they decided the further policies. In this first summit, 25 members of the states joined this summit, and later the number of members increased up to 120, and this number was noticed in 17th summit of non-aligned movement summit in 2016, which held in Venezuela. Now, meaning of name. Earlier, you have known the full form of NAM, and we have discussed and I have told you about it many times. NAM stands for Non aligned movement. In fact, when India got freedom, I have repeated many times earlier also that India did not want to join any of the power bloc, either USSR or the US. Because if India had joined one power bloc, its clear meaning was that the other group would become against of India. But it did not mean that India wanted to remain in isolation. In these days, you are hearing this word isolation again and again, and many newspapers also. Isolation means to keep aloof from all matters. But it did not mean that India would remain neutral. Neutral means not take interest in any matter of the world. But if India had joined any of the power bloc, India would have to accept the decision of that power bloc blindly. But India did not want such policies, and she wanted to keep her views independently. That's why India did not join any of the power bloc. Now we come to another topic, NEO. NEO, that stands for New International Economic Order. You have studied about this in your 10th class in history book. New International Economic Order. It means there were some changes in the economic policies of the world. Named countries were more than merely mediators during the Cold War. It means they were not mediating between the two power blocs. Actually, due to strong rivalries, it was not clear to newly independent countries which type of foreign policy they should adopt. Secondly, these countries were LDC. Here, let me clear you the meaning of LDC. It is least developed countries. Due to colonial rule, the economic resources of these countries had been exploited by the colonial rulers. So, they did not have sufficient resources. Their economy was not so strong, but they wanted that their country should develop as soon as possible, and they were making efforts to raise living standard of their people. They also wanted to compete with the other developed nations. So they were forced on sustained development. Sustained development where they wanted to make continue efforts to develop their countries continually. Now, the next topic is UNCTAD. UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. This institution brought a report in 1972. In this report, they proposed a reform of the global trading system. Why? Because the developing countries or the LDC or in newly independent countries, they were exporting the raw material, only raw material to the developed countries. And this raw material was used by the developed countries, and they used this raw material to manufacture the new goods. And later, these goods were sold to these developing countries at very high cost. In this way, These developed nations were earning a big profit, but the uh, developing countries were in loss because they were not getting the proper price of their raw material. So, some other decisions were taken on the suggestion of UNCTAD, like give least developed countries control over their natural resources, which were earlier exploited by developed Western countries. As the developed countries had advanced technology, so they forced the developing countries to avail them the raw material at very nominal price. But the developing countries were not ready without getting the proper price of their raw material. Number two, obtain access to Western market means these developing countries wanted that the developed countries should avail or should open their markets for the developing countries also, so that least developed countries could sell their product to make trade more beneficial for the poor countries. Another issue was that the developed countries should reduce the cost of technology and they should avail the advanced technology to the less developed countries or least developed countries at very nominal price. So, this provided the less developed countries a greater role in the international market. So, in this way, the least developed countries were becoming or they were taking a form of a pressure group in the international scenario. Now, here is another topic that we call India and the Cold War. It means when this Cold War was going on, what was the role of India in this Cold War? I think now the meaning of Cold War is very clear to you. As India had played a significant role in non-aligned movement. So, it was the duty of India to guide the world. Due to efforts of India, many countries of African continent got freedom after 1950. So these countries were thankful to India for the support at the global platform. Many people think that NAM or non-aligned movement means staying away from the two alliances. But it was not so. And second was raised voice against newly decolonized country become part of these alliances. Means the countries who got freedom recently means from 1950 to 1975. They were eager to join either power bloc because they were worried about the security of their nation and they feared that some other colonial power may occupy their country again. So, this insecurity forced them to take shelter of the either power bloc. Now, new policy by India. As India had decided to develop her own views, so India favored activities in intervening in world affairs. Means India had decided not to remain separate from the international affairs, but India would express her views according to her benefit and as well as the world benefit also. Next, the non aligned movement tried to decrease differences between the two power blocks because the world could not bear another world war after the previous two world wars. So, India wanted to reduce the chances of the world war. That's why India activated countries who were not part of any power bloc. India asked to join them the non-aligned movement and India succeeded in her name, and in this way the member countries of the non-aligned movement increased rapidly and they started showing interest in non-aligned movement, and this was the main reason that India became popular in non-aligned movement, and it allowed India to take international decision freely because the power of neutral countries or those countries who were not power of either power bloc who were not part of either power bloc, they were supporting India, and that's why India promoted these countries also to keep their independent views. And in this way, this movement succeeded in maintaining balance between the two superpowers. And in this way, the world was protected from another world war. In fact, none of the superpower means either US or USSR. They wanted to start any war because they knew well it was easy to start a war, but it was not so easy to close the war. But India's policy to keep herself separate from the international politics was criticized a lot because many countries thought that India must not keep herself separate from the world politics. It means India was trying to avoid the world politics or the international matters. And that is the reason they criticize our country or India a lot. But India made it clear that if India remains separate from the two power blocks, that does not mean India has no interest in the world politics or India is neutral. But India want to maintain balance between the two power blocks so that world may not have to face another world war, and the main aim of India was to maintain peace in the world. That's why India succeeded in developing the non aligned movement in the world, and still at present this movement is playing a very significant role. Though the Cold War had ended, it has ended in 1995 after the disintegration of the USSR. But in present scenario, Russia is becoming again more powerful, but still it is hoped that now too powers, America and Russia, will show the maturity, and the world will be a peaceful place to live for the people. Thank you. Now, it is my suggestion to all of you that you should download your book if you have not downloaded and solve the exercise of this chapter. And you have to note down the answers. This will be considered as your project work also, or activities, and you will be given credit for this. So you are advised to send me the notes or homework you do at home, and then send me so that I may be able to give you marks of it. Thank you so much.